It was a typical Friday evening in Seattle, where the sky seemed to perpetually wear a coat of heavy lead gray, and the rain never truly ceased. Inside apartment 402, located on the fourth floor of an aging building where the paint had begun to peel, the air was thick, stifling to the point where one could feel its weight pressing down on their chest. Clara stood before the kitchen sink. Her hands were submerged in warm, soapy water, yet she felt no comfort. She scrubbed a white porcelain plate vigorously. The squeaking sound of the friction echoed, mingling with the rain drumming rhythmically against the window pane, as if trying to shatter the silence inside. But all those chaotic sounds, the falling rain, the running water, the wind whistling through the cracks, could not drown out the voice of the sports commentator blaring from the large-screen TV in the living room. It was a match Clara cared nothing about, and she suspected that even the person watching it didn't truly care either. Her husband, Elias, was sitting there. He sank deep into the ash-gray sofa. His broad back was turned toward her, motionless like a forgotten sculpture. In his hand was a can of beer, opened long ago. The condensation on the outside had melted away, leaving a small puddle on the wooden table, but he didn't bother to wipe it up. The beer was stone cold, just like the atmosphere between the two of them right now. Clara turned off the faucet. She stood still for a second, watching the water swirl down the drain, carrying away the white suds. She exhaled sharply, hastily wiped her soaked hands on her faded floral apron, and walked slowly into the living room. Her gaze did not fall on her husband, but stopped at an object lying haphazardly in the middle of the floor. It was an oak bookshelf. It lay there, messy, unfinished, like an ugly scar across the polished wooden floor. The planks hadn't been sanded smooth. One leg was installed completely crooked, and screws lay scattered around like spent bullet casings after a battle. A thin layer of wood dust covered everything, floating suspended in the flickering blue light cast by the TV screen, creating a scene that was both ghostly and pathetic. It was the ambitious project Elias had promised to build for her with his own hands. "I'll make you a small library right in our home," he had said 6 months ago, his eyes shining with determination. But then, day after day, week after week, that bookshelf remained there, missing a leg, leaning, and dusty. It became an obstacle that Clara had to dodge every day to avoid tripping, and today, looking at it, she no longer saw the romance of that promise made years ago. She saw only disappointment. She saw the image of her own marriage manifested right there in those warped wooden planks. Unfinished, stagnant, and neglected.
In that eerily silent moment, Clara's memory suddenly drifted back 3 years. An autumn evening at a loud and bustling jazz bar downtown. That was the first time she met Elias. Amidst the crowd laughing and dancing wildly to the music, Elias sat alone in a corner of the bar, holding a drink, his pensive eyes observing everything around him. He didn't participate in the idle chatter. He didn't try to impress anyone. He was like a quiet island in a noisy ocean. It was that very silence, that solid rock demeanor, that made Clara's heart skip a beat. She, a girl who was always bubbly, talkative, and sometimes exhausted by her own noise, had found a peaceful harbor in Elias. She used to proudly tell her close friends, "Elias isn't like those shallow men out there. He doesn't need to shout to prove himself. He is quiet, mysterious, and deep. Being with him, I feel heard. I feel protected." She remembered their first dates, when she would ramble on for hours about her wild dreams, about her petty fears, and Elias would just sit there, smiling gently, occasionally nodding. She thought it was absolute understanding. She thought she had found the perfect puzzle piece for her life. But tonight, 3 years after the wedding, in this dimly lit living room, the solid rock she once worshipped had mutated. It was no longer something for her to lean on. It had become a cold, towering fortress wall separating her from his world. The quietness of the past had revealed its true form as a terrifying silence. The mystery of the past was now just unfeeling distance. "Elias?" Clara called out softly, her voice drowned in the roar of the crowd coming from the TV. No answer. Elias remained motionless, his eyes glued to the screen where tiny players ran back and forth. Clara took a deep breath, trying to suppress the trembling rising in her throat. She took another step, her voice higher, sharper, carrying the repression of hundreds of days. "Are you planning to finish that bookshelf, or should I throw it out to make room? I'm sick of walking around it every single day." Only then did Elias move slightly. His shoulders slumped, and he sighed. A heavy, weary sigh that Clara knew by heart. It was the sigh of a man who felt pestered, disturbed in his own home. He still didn't turn to look at his wife, dropping only a brief sentence, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Don't make a scene, okay? Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. I'll do it this weekend. I already told you." The 3 words, "this weekend," were the fuse that lit the bomb Clara had been harboring for the past 6 months. "Which weekend, Elias?" Clara screamed. The scream tore through the stifling silence, overpowering even the TV. 24 weekends have passed. 24 times you promised, and 24 times this pile of scrap wood is just laid there. Look at it. Look closely at it. It's not just a bookshelf. It looks exactly like our marriage. Unfinished, full of dust, and you don't even care enough to fix it. Elias fell silent, a silence more terrifying than the scream. He slowly set the beer can down on the table. The sound of the metal hitting the glass rang out with a dry clink. He picked up the TV remote, his thumb pressing hard on the volume up button. The voice of the commentator suddenly roared, filling the space, burying Clara's sobbing, which was beginning to break forth.
He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply refused to communicate. He added another layer of bricks to the invisible wall between them. That night was an endless night. They lay together on the familiar double bed, the bed they had once chosen together with so much excitement about passionate nights, but now they lay back to back. Clara lay on the very edge of the left side, curled up in a thin blanket. Elias lay on the very edge of the right side. The gap between them was only the width of a hand, but emotionally, it was as distant as if separated by a vast ocean. Clara opened her eyes, staring blankly into the darkness. Tears streamed down her face, soaking the pillowcase. She could hear Elias's steady breathing. How could he sleep? How could he be so calm when her world was collapsing? In the darkness, Clara painfully realized a cruel truth, a truth she had tried to hide from for so long. The quietness she once fell madly in love with was now the indifference that was killing her soul every day. The mystery she once praised was now cowardice, avoiding facing problems. And she also vaguely realized, on the other side of the bed, perhaps Elias was disillusioned too. Her bubbliness, her passion, her laughter that Elias was once infatuated with, that he once considered the fire warming his dull life, now in his eyes was perhaps just annoyance, noise, and control. She recalled his eyes tonight. It wasn't hatred, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of a man who felt he was never enough, who felt his home was no longer a place of rest, but a battlefield with endless demands and expectations.
Marriage, it turned out, was not rose-colored like the Hollywood movies they used to watch together on rainy days. Marriage doesn't end with the line, "and they lived happily ever after." Marriage is the moment you wake up at 3 a.m., look at the person lying next to you, and ask yourself, who is this person? And why have the things I loved most about them now become the daggers stabbing into my heart the hardest? Hello, everyone. I am Raphael. The story of Elias and Clara that you just heard may have caused a sting in your heart, or perhaps you saw your own reflection in their cracked mirror. Do not worry, because the tragedy of Elias and Clara is not an isolated case. It is a classic script, a psychological pattern that repeats itself, one that I encounter every day, every hour in my consultation room.
We often step into marriage with luggage full of illusions and a severe lack of realistic understanding of human psychology. If I had a time machine to take Elias and Clara back 3 years, right to the moment before they put pen to paper on their marriage certificate, I wouldn't advise them on how to manage finances or split chores. Those things are important, but not the core. I would sit down with them and talk about a brutal but extremely important psychological rule, the flip side of attraction, and the trap of potential. The first and most important thing anyone wishes they knew before marriage is this: the person you love and the person you live with are two different entities viewed through two opposing lenses. When in love, our brains release massive amounts of dopamine and oxytocin. These are neurotransmitters that create feelings of euphoria and bonding. Under the influence of this natural drug, we view our partner through brilliant rose-colored glasses. We don't see their true selves, we see the idealized version we crave. This is the stage of projection. Look at Clara's case. 3 years ago, she looked at Elias's silence. What did she see? She didn't see a man of few words. She projected into that silence her own desires for stability, for depth, for a mysterious man like in a novel. She called it solidity. But after marriage, when the love hormones settle down and the pressures of real life, food, clothing, money, children, crash in, the rose-colored glasses shatter. Replacing them is a giant magnifying glass that inspects every crack. The naked truth appears. Elias isn't mysterious at all. Psychologically, Elias likely belongs to the avoidant attachment style. He doesn't speak not because he is thinking profound thoughts, but because he doesn't know how to handle emotions. He fears conflict, and his defense mechanism is to retreat into a shell, freezing his feelings. The silence that was once a safe shelter for Clara when dating has now become the sharpest weapon of cold violence, stonewalling, hurting her deeply. And conversely, we must be fair to Elias. Let's put ourselves in his shoes. Back then, why did he love Clara? Because she talked a lot, she was quirky, she was full of life energy. He, an introverted and dull person, was attracted to that fire. He called it passion. He thought she would bring light to his dark life. But when living under the same roof in the tight space of 4 walls, that fire began to burn him. Clara's constant care and questioning under the pressure of marriage turned into control. Her sharing of emotions turned into nagging and complaining. He felt suffocated. He felt like he was being monitored by a talkative warden. He shrank back, not because he stopped loving her, but because he was trying to protect his last bit of private space. The painful lesson here is that every personality trait is a two-sided coin. The head side is what makes you love them, and the tail side is what will drive you crazy. Generosity when dating can turn into reckless spending when married. Being meticulous and thoughtful when dating can turn into being patriarchal, scrutinizing every speck of dust when living together. Being carefree and easygoing when dating can be the very seed of irresponsibility and lack of ambition later on.
Therefore, before getting married, don't just look at the head side. Ask yourself, if this strength is pushed to the extreme on the worst possible day, what will it look like? And can I endure it? The second thing the story of Elias and Clara teaches us is about the trap of potential, or what I often call unfinished project syndrome. The bookshelf in the story is not just a piece of furniture. It is a perfect metaphor, a heartbreaking symbol of their marriage. Clara made a mistake that millions of women and men make. She married a potential. She didn't love Elias entirely for who he was at that moment. She loved the image she thought he would become. She believed her love was a miracle, a magic potion that could change Elias's nature. She thought, once we're married, I'll help him open up. I'll make him more proactive. She viewed her husband as a renovation project, an old house that needed to be remodeled to her liking. But ladies and gentlemen, marriage is not a rehabilitation center, and a spouse is not a lump of clay for you to mold as you please. Here is a cruel truth. Humans rarely change their core personality unless they themselves want to and go through massive upheavals. When Clara looked at the unfinished bookshelf, she was angry not just because the shelf wasn't done. She was angry because she realized her project to change Elias had failed miserably. Elias was still Elias, slow, procrastinating, and avoidant. Clara's disappointment was actually her own disillusionment with her own abilities. She realized her love wasn't powerful enough to change a human being. And Elias, he felt that. He felt the non-acceptance from his wife. Every time Clara nagged about the bookshelf, he didn't hear a reminder about a task. He heard an underlying message, "You are not good enough. You are a failure. You disappoint me." And what is the natural reaction of a man when he feels he has failed? It is to stop trying. It is to give up. It is to turn his back, drink beer, and watch TV to escape the feeling of being a loser in his wife's eyes. So what is the psychologist's perspective here? What must we do before it's too late? If you are standing on the threshold of marriage, or if you are in a marriage and feel stuck like Elias and Clara, do this mental exercise. It is brutal, but it will save you. Look straight at your partner. Strip away all illusions, all hopes for the future. Look at them right now with all their naked flaws. Look at Elias's maddening silence. Look at Clara's controlling anxiety. Look at how they spend money, how they treat their parents, how they get angry in traffic. And ask yourself this question. If this person never changes, if they stay exactly like this for 10 years, 20 years, or 50 years, can I accept living with that happily? Note, I said happily accept, not resigned to endure. If the answer is no, I can't stand it if he stays like this forever, then stop. Love alone is not enough. You cannot build a house on a foundation of false hope. But if the answer is yes, I find it annoying, but I understand it's part of who he is, and I value their other qualities more than I focus on this crack, then congratulations. You are ready for a real marriage. Mature marriage is not about finding a flawless puzzle piece. Marriage is the commitment between two flawed human beings who refuse to give up on each other even when the magnifying glass of life shines on their ugliest dark corners. Marriage is the art of compromise and acceptance. It is when Clara learns to understand that Elias's silence is a need for rest, not a rejection of her love. It is when Elias learns to understand that Clara's noise is a cry for help from loneliness, not an attack on him. Don't wait until the bookshelf is covered in dust, until the gaps in the bed become too vast to bridge, to realize you entered this game with the wrong rulebook. Learn to love the naked reality instead of loving the phantom potential. Because in the end, the only thing that saves your marriage is not romance, but understanding and compassion for each other's flaws. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I am Raphael. And I hope this story will be a small lamp shining into the hidden corners of your relationship, helping you look at your partner with more tolerance, realism, and depth. See you in the next stories.